10 objects, 10 names, 10 trails to death that refuse to stay buried in history. From a diamond torn from a god's eye to a chair no one dares to sit in. These are not campfire tales. They are documented, witnessed, and still active today. This is Morbid Circuit. Let's begin.
And horrible deaths along the way.
Here are the centuries-old facts and fictions.
In the 17th century, a French gem merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier is said to have pried a deep blue diamond from the eye socket of a temple idol in India. Legend claims that the priest placed a curse on whoever possessed it. Tavernier sold the stone to King Louis XIV of France, and from that point forward, the diamond's ownership reads like a body count. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who wore the stone, were executed during the French Revolution. The diamond vanished for decades before resurfacing, recut and smaller, in the hands of a string of owners who each met devastating fates. Henry Philip Hope's family lost their fortune. A Turkish sultan who acquired the stone was overthrown. The family reportedly lost at sea. Evelyn Walsh McLean, the American socialite who wore the diamond as a personal talisman, watched her young son die in a car accident, her daughter die of a drug overdose, her husband declared insane, and her family's newspaper empire collapse into bankruptcy. In 1958, jeweler Harry Winston donated the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution, where it sits today behind reinforced glass, viewed by millions each year. The Smithsonian insists the curse is nothing more than marketing folklore invented to boost the stone's mystique and resale value, but researchers who have traced the diamond's ownership records count no fewer than a dozen documented tragedies attached to the people who held it. Whether folklore or fact, the Hope Diamond remains one of the most stared at, most feared objects on Earth, a 45.5 carat warning wrapped in blue light.
Decades of work had failed to reveal a single
November 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter breaks through a sealed doorway in the Valley of the Kings and lays eyes on the intact tomb of King Tutankhamun for the first time in 3,000 years. Within months, the men connected to that discovery begin dying. Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, is bitten by a mosquito on his cheek, nicks the bite while shaving, and dies of blood poisoning weeks later. At the exact moment of his death, witnesses claim the lights across Cairo flickered out, and back in England, Carnarvon's dog reportedly howled and died the same night. Newspapers seized on the story, reporting that an inscription inside the tomb read, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." No such inscription has been verified by Egyptologists. Still, the deaths continue. Within a decade, at least 11 people connected to the excavation, including the man who x-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy and the financier's own half-brother, are dead under circumstances ranging from sudden illness to suicide. Statisticians later point out that of the 58 people present when the tomb was opened, only 8 people died within the following decade, a rate no higher than any group that age. Egyptologists blame toxic mold spores and bacteria sealed inside the tomb for thousands of years, capable of causing fatal respiratory illness in anyone who breathed that ancient air. Science has an explanation. The public, over a century later, still isn't buying it.
You bet for him in the fight scene.
For over 400 years, actors have refused to speak the name Macbeth inside a theater, calling it only Scottish play. The superstition traces back to the 1600s, when legend claims William Shakespeare used real incantations from actual witches in the play's script, and the witches responded by cursing the production. The opening performance is said to have ended in the sudden death of the boy actor playing Lady Macbeth. That was the only beginning. In 1849, a rivalry between two actors performing the role sparked a riot outside a New York theater that left over 20 people dead. In 1937, actor Laurence Olivier nearly died on stage when a stage weight crashed down inches from his head during a production at the Old Vic. A fire broke out in that same theater during the same run. In 1942, 3 actors playing the witches died during a single production, along with the costume designer and the actor playing Duncan. Productions across the world report broken bones, mysterious fires, and sudden power outages whenever the play is performed. Actors who accidentally say the cursed name inside a theater are required by tradition to leave the building, spin in a circle 3 times, spit over their shoulder, and recite a line from Shakespeare before being allowed back inside. Skeptics point out that Macbeth was historically a popular play performed by struggling, understaffed theater companies using dangerous stage combat and open flame lighting, a formula for accidents regardless of any curse. But 4 centuries later, the superstition hasn't loosened its grip on a single stage. In 1955, actor James Dean purchased a silver Porsche 550 Spider and nicknamed it Little Bastard. Actor Alec Guinness reportedly took one look at the car and told Dean that if he got in it, he would be dead within a week. 7 days later, James Dean was killed when the Porsche collided with another vehicle on a California highway. The car should have ended there. Instead, it was sold for parts, and the horror followed every piece. Mechanic George Barris brought the wreck and sold the engine and drivetrain to 2 separate doctors, both of whom crashed their own race cars using those exact parts on the same afternoon. One died instantly, the other was critically injured. The car's tires were sold to a driver who blew out both tires simultaneously and was nearly killed. Thieves who tried to steal parts of the car's dashboard and seat were both badly injured in unrelated accidents. A truck transporting the wrecked shell later crashed, killing the driver, and the garage where the car was displayed burned to the ground. In 1959, while being transported to a car show, the trailer carrying the wreck came loose, crushing a bystander. In 1960, the remains of Little Bastard vanished completely during transport and have never been found. Dozens of carriers, garages, and collectors touched pieces of that car, and by most tallies, over a dozen people connected to it were killed or seriously injured. To this day, no one knows where the wreckage of Little Bastard actually is. Joseph P. Kennedy built one of the most powerful political dynasties in American history. What followed was a chain of tragedy so relentless that historians and tabloids alike gave it a name: the Kennedy Curse. His eldest son, Joseph Jr., died when his bomber aircraft exploded during a secret mission in World War II. His daughter Kathleen died in a plane crash in France 4 years later. His daughter Rosemary was left permanently incapacitated after a medical procedure her father authorized without her mother's knowledge. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas in 1963 in full view of the public. His brother, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, was assassinated 5 years later while running for president himself. Senator Edward Kennedy survived a plane crash that left him with lifelong injuries, and years later was the sole survivor of a car accident that claimed the life of a young campaign worker in the next generation. John F. Kennedy Jr. died when the small plane he was piloting crashed into Atlantic Ocean, taking his wife and sister-in-law with him. Other family members have faced addiction, fatal skiing accidents, and untimely deaths that continue into the present day. Historians largely attribute the pattern to the family's extraordinary public exposure, wealth, and love of high-risk activity, private planes, sailing, skiing, and a level of fame that made every family member a potential target. But for a family that has buried so many of its own before their time, the word curse has never quite stopped following the Kennedy name. If your skin is still crawling, this is the exact moment to hit subscribe, because 5 more curses are waiting on the other side of this video, and some of them are still following people alive today. Drop a comment right now and tell me which curse on this list already has you checking over your shoulder. Hit the bell icon so you never miss what's coming next. Let's keep going. In the early 1900s, a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto was given a stuffed doll by a family servant rumored to practice folk magic after being mistreated by the Otto family. The boy renamed the doll after himself and became inseparable from it. Neighbors reported hearing multiple voices coming from the boy's room, arguing back and forth when only Robert should have been home. Family members claimed to see the doll's expression change and to catch it moving between rooms on its own. Visitors reported the doll's eyes seemed to track them across a room. As Robert Eugene Otto grew older, he kept the doll in a turret room of his Key West home for the rest of his life. After his death, the home changed hands and the doll was eventually donated to the Fort East Martello Museum in the Key West, where it remains on display today, seated inside a locked glass case. Museum staff and visitors have reported camera malfunctions, sudden equipment failures, and unexplained illnesses after photographing the doll without asking its permission first. The museum receives hundreds of letters every year from visitors who photographed Robert and then suffered accidents, broken relationships, or streaks of bad luck shortly afterward. Many of the letters include apologies addressed directly to the doll, begging for the bad luck to stop. Paranormal investigators have recorded what they describe as unexplained audio anomalies near the case. To this day, staff insist that if you want to photograph Robert the doll, the respectful thing is to ask him out loud first.
Broken its promise in over 30 years, despite numerous requests and even the threat of leak.
In a museum in Sowerby Bridge, England, sits an oak chair that no one is permitted to sit in, not because it's an antique, but because of what happened to the people who did. The chair belonged to Thomas Busby, a counterfeiter and a convicted murderer. executed in 1702 for killing of his father-in-law. As the story goes, before he was taken to the gallows, Busby was allowed one final drink at the inn he owned. He sat in his favorite chair and cursed it, swearing that anyone else who ever sat in that seat again would meet the same fate he was about to. His body was displayed near the inn as a public warning for years, and the chair remained at the inn long after his death. Over the following 2.5 centuries, a disturbing pattern of deaths was reported among people who sat in Busby's chair: airmen during World War II, chimney sweeps, delivery drivers, and local patrons. By some counts, over 60 deaths have been linked to the chair, most involving fatal accidents shortly after the person got up and left the pub. In 1978, the pub's owner donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum, where curators made a decision that has held ever since. The chair is suspended on the wall, mounted high enough that absolutely no one can sit in it ever again. Museum staff maintain the height isn't for preservation, it's a precaution. In 2001, a Portland, Oregon man named Kevin Manis purchased an antique wine cabinet at an estate sale from the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. She warned him the box had belonged to her grandmother, who kept it locked and never explained why. Inside, Manis found strange objects: locks of hair, a candlestick, a wine goblet, a Hebrew inscription that translates roughly to a binding of a demonic spirit called a Dibbuk, a restless, malevolent soul from Jewish folklore said to cling to the living. After buying the box, Manis reported nightmares, unexplained bruising, and a string of catastrophic events across his family and business. He gave the box to his mother as a gift. She suffered a stroke within days. Every subsequent owner reported similarly rapid misfortune: burning smells with no source, electronics failing simultaneously, hair loss, and a heavy, suffocating presence whenever the box was opened. The box was eventually listed on eBay with Manis's full account attached, sparking a bidding war and national media coverage. It inspired the 2012 horror film The Possession. Its current owner, paranormal collector Zach Bagans, keeps it sealed inside a specially built containment unit in his haunted museum in Las Vegas and warns visitors never to open it. Skeptics call the entire story a masterfully executed piece of marketing folklore, but every owner who has spoken publicly about the box tells a version of the same story. Open it and something follows you home.
Tracy, got a little something for you. One I looked into myself back
In the 1950s and 60s, a mass-produced painting of a tearful young boy became one of the best-selling pieces of home decor in Britain, hanging in tens of thousands of houses across the country. In September 1985, a British tabloid published a story that would follow the painting for decades. Firefighters across England had noticed that in house after house destroyed by fire, one object routinely survived completely undamaged: a print of the crying boy, sometimes found face down and untouched in the ashes of an otherwise gutted home. Fire departments began compiling reports. Homeowners described fires starting with no clear cause, always in houses that displayed the painting. The tabloid ran the headline "Curse of the Crying Boy," and public panic followed. Families across Britain tore the paintings down and in a mass bonfire organized by the newspaper, thousands of copies were burned in a single night. The artist behind the original portrait was reportedly a Spanish painter who used real orphan street children as models, and rumors spread that one of the child models had been cursed, or that the pigment itself was flame retardant, explaining why it survived house fires that destroyed everything around it. Fire investigators have since offered the more mundane explanation. The varnish used on the mass-produced prints contained a fire-resistant coating that allowed the boards to survive heat that consumed ordinary wood and fabric. Explanation or not, decades later, the crying boy is still one of the most feared images ever hung on a living room wall.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
Since the character's creation, a disturbing number of actors connected to Superman have met devastating fates, giving rise to what fans call the Superman curse. George Reeves, who played Superman in the 1950s television series, died from a gunshot wound in 1959. A death still debated as either suicide or homicide. Christopher Reeve, who defined the role for a generation in the 1978 films, was paralyzed from the neck down after a horseback riding accident in 1995 and spent the rest of his life advocating for spinal cord research before his death in 2004. His wife, Dana Reeve, died of lung cancer just 17 months later despite never having smoked. Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane opposite Christopher Reeve, struggled publicly with mental health crises for years, including a widely reported disappearance. Richard Pryor, who co-starred in Superman 3, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis shortly after filming. Even the character's creators were not spared. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who created Superman in 1938, sold the rights for a fraction of their value and spent decades in poverty and obscurity, while the character they had invented became one of the most valuable pieces of intellectual property on Earth. Then there's Henry Cavill, the actor who wore the cape from 2013 to 2017 and seemed for a while to be the exception. In 2022, following a cameo in Black Adam, Cavill announced he was returning to the role. Months later, under new studio leadership at DC, that comeback was reversed and production moved forward with a different actor instead. No injury, no scandal, no tragedy, just a professional pivot. Since then, Cavill has built one of the busiest slates in Hollywood, taking on a Highlander reboot, a Guy Ritchie thriller, a return to Sherlock Holmes for Netflix, and a long gestating Warhammer 40k adaptation. Rumors of another Superman comeback occasionally resurface online, though nothing has been confirmed for now. Henry Cavill remains something the Superman curse has never produced before, an actor who lost the cape and walked away completely unscathed. Some fans point the original comic's Kryptonian mythology, others to simple statistical coincidence across nearly a century of casting. But every time a new actor puts on the cape, the internet asks the same question: is this the role that finally breaks the pattern, or the next name added to the list?
So yeah, 10 warnings history refused to heed. Some call it coincidence, others won't say the names out loud. Tell me in the comments which one you would never risk testing. Subscribe to Morbid Circuit for more of what refuses to stay buried. Stay curious, stay careful.